Anita, it is so nice to have you with us today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
And I think one of the things I want to get started with, because you have such an impressive background as far as being an athlete. And, as if people are watching, they're actually like seeing behind you your Olympic medals. And, that's something I really want you to share with people is, what was that journey like as a young kid too?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I always had it in my head, like, I want to go to the Olympics someday from the time I was very young. I started swimming when I was just 5 years old.
Wow.
So I was one of these earlier bloomers, I guess you would say,
Yeah.
within the sport. And I say that, but I want everyone listening to understand that everyone has their time and their journey. My son and my daughter, they haven't even they're she's 16 and he's going to turn 18 soon, and they haven't even come close to reaching their peak in anything yet. They're just on their trajectory up.
Yeah.
So everyone has their own time frame. So don't get caught up when I say I started when I was 5. Oh, that's what you have to do. No, everyone has their own journey. And parents, if you're listening, with your kids, let your kids explore. I did all kinds of sports when I was a kid.
Mhm.
I was an all-around athlete. I just really enjoyed being outside. I enjoyed playing. I enjoyed anything that had to do with movement of my body. And so and I still do to this day. For the most part, I'm not super athletic anymore. Like, I
Mhm.
don't do sports, but I love salsa dancing, and
Mhm.
I love riding on my roller skates and my rollerblades. So I like to be active still to this day. So I tell you all that just to say that I started off very active as a young one, and my parents saw really fast how important that was for me, that I continue and get into things physically so that I could burn off some energy.
Yeah.
And so that was really important for me as a kid.
Yeah, and then that actually led to you competing in the '92 Olympics,
Mhm.
but you were like one of the youngest people on the Olympic team at that time.
Yes, I was. And the funniest part about all of that is that I was so young, but I got beat by a 13-year-old or
Oh,
14.
wow.
I think she had just turned 14 in my main event, which was the 200-meter breaststroke. So I was what you would call, for those of you who aren't swimmers, I was what you would call a middle distance swimmer.
Mhm.
And then I also swam the sprint for my stroke, the 100 meter. So I swam both of those, and then a relay. But
Yeah.
I got beat by a 14-year-old. Isn't that so
That is
crazy?
so wild.
Yes.
I couldn't just imagine being, 14, 15-year-olds at like the biggest stage, like an athletic event.
Yeah, it can be intimidating. That is why everyone wants to watch the Olympic Games.
Mm.
Even if you don't ever watch swimming or anything ever for 4
Yeah.
years, you want to when it comes
Mhm.
around, because you're inherently, we all know, even if you didn't even play sports, we all know how difficult it is to get to that elite
Yeah.
status.
Mhm.
There are so many things that incorporate into that athlete
Yeah.
to have made them get there. So many components, the mental being a
Mhm.
huge one. I have parents who say things to me all the time, like, uh, my kid does great in practice. They're always leading the practices, but when it comes time for the meet or the game, they struggle mentally.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
this is a big piece of it. It's a
Mm.
huge. It's okay. Do they still have Trivial Pursuit, the game?
I
Do
mean,
you know?
I've seen it. I think I've seen it at the store. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, you're a
Yeah.
bit younger than me. So,
Yeah.
okay, so maybe they still have the Trivial Pursuit. So, guys, if they have Trivial Pursuit, if not, Google this
Yeah.
Trivial Pursuit game piece. Okay, it's like a round thing with pieces, and you earn the
Yeah.
pieces. I think of being an elite athlete in that same way. You have to get the pieces, and it's like the more pieces you can get, the better your chance of rising to the
Mm.
highest level in your sport. The more pieces you can add, whether that's nutrition's on point,
Mhm.
your mindset's on point, your practices are on point, your academics are
Mhm.
on point. I mean, that's a piece.
Yeah.
So there are just so many pieces to that puzzle and that pie that you want to make sure you're getting all of them, if you as many of them as you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, and I think that's such a just value that's coming to the table when we think about that, because our student athletes today are faced with so many different things as they're trying to get to that next level, and they're really trying to take their game to the next level. And I particularly remember a conversation that I had with, one of our national championship wrestlers that I worked with when I was at Penn State. And we were talking about how he said, when I get ready for a match, like I have a certain regiment that I go through. He said, but I can't, he was not adequating that he could do that exact same thing to get ready for an exam, and
Oh, I
how
see.
these
Yes.
things, they all go together in everything that
Yes.
we do. And, one of the things I like, your story is so powerful because you experienced some major setbacks after
Mhm.
the 92 Olympics. And what you realize is a lot of that came from the nutrition side of things.
Yes, for me. So I had, if I go back again to that puzzle piece with all
Mhm.
those different, let's just say there's 8. I don't really have a set number for how many things go in there, and it could vary from person to person. But for the most part, there's going to be some foundational pieces that
Yeah.
have to be met. And I had the mindset, I had the grit, I had the training. I
Mhm.
had an elite level coach. I had the team behind me. I had the schooling. But what I was severely lacking on was the recovery strategies.
Mm.
I was putting all of this hard work into my body, just like grinding my body to a nub,
Yeah.
excuse me, and not replenishing it. Is if you think of a
Mm.
gas tank, when that gas gets on E and you don't put more gas in it, you're going to putter out. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of times our students hear coaches and they hear their parents and they hear everybody talk about, well, we need to eat healthy. But most students actually don't know what that means. So
No
how can
idea.
can we define that a little bit for our listeners?
Sure. I break it down really simply. Of course, I have strategies, I've got formulas, I've got even a trademarked formula that I teach called the Powerplay Formula for Mealtime Success. But what it really comes down to is balanced eating of whole foods,
Mm,
real whole foods. If you can just focus on that alone, you will be leaps and bounds ahead of your peers in terms of your sport.
wow. And I
And we
think
try and break it down and make it so difficult. It's like, well, what diet? It's not about a diet,
mm,
guys. It's not at all. In fact, just take that word out of your vernacular and
yeah,
just go, okay, how can I eat more whole foods?
yeah.
Whole foods are foods in their most natural state,
Mhm,
a potato versus potato chips.
mm,
So that's really important. If you had to break it down to one simple thing, that would
yeah.
be it. And kids nowadays, I look at tons of food logs. And I can look at food logs. Let's just say I look at 10.
Mhm.
There would be, I would guess, probably 6 to 8 of those food logs, probably more like 8, would not have one whole food in it in a
Wow.
day. Not one. And
Wow.
protein powder does not count as a whole food.
Right. Right. And so if we and I'm just kind of think of, I've heard this term when people talk about whole foods of saying like if it comes from the ground or if it has a mother, like was that something that like you would say like yes, that's what we would
Yes.
classify whole foods as?
Yes, and think of most natural state.
Mhm.
Think of what we used to eat before the food industry came in and started putting everything in a bag and a box.
Got it.
Just think
Yes.
of it that way.
Yeah.
That's even maybe easier if you just think of like our ancestors,
Mhm.
our Paleolithic sort of time period people. And what did you eat? You ate what you could get, what you could
Right.
forage, what you could kill, what you I hate to say
Yeah.
it, but it's just true. It's just and genetically we're not much different.
Right.
Our actual genes are still our DNA is not much different. So
Mhm.
we still require the same types of food for optimal fueling success.
Yeah. And that's so powerful because I think about, as my brain, I'm like walking around into this grocery store and thinking, well, if we would just stay on the outside, you hear it all
That's
the
right.
time. If you just stay on the outer aisles
Yes.
of the grocery store and not go in between the middles, you're really going to find that's where your whole food is.
Yes, walk the perimeter, as we always say. Just take that outside stroll and see how much you can conjure up from just
Yeah.
that alone. And then I always say, stroll the perimeter and then fill in the holes or the gaps with
Mhm.
the inside. And that should be just a few sporadic things, just a few little things like,
Yeah.
for example, you might need that protein powder. That does fill in a gap for athletes. It is important to have that in particular. I would say if there was one process thing, that would be it.
Yeah. Okay. That's just such a great piece of wisdom, especially if I'm thinking of our parents who are listening and they're trying to navigate this and walk their students through this. They're also having to make some changes in their lives too, because,
Yes.
because I can personally say, like, I didn't grow up having this type of knowledge. I could remember like grabbing a Pop Tart and heading out to practice, which, like, what is that really going to do for me to take it to the next level? And, you know, thinking about, okay, not eating properly, I go back to some of the injuries I had. And now I'm thinking, oh, had I been fueling my body with whole foods, those injuries may not have lasted as long and the
That's right.
recovery would have been so much quicker.
I can speak to this with 100% certainty that injuries are reduced, injury
Mm,
recovery time is significantly reduced with better eating. And the biggest mistake that an athlete makes is only correlating what they eat with how they look.
oh,
That is
that's
a
yes.
huge mistake because we are actually, your body, everything about you is related to your fueling plan,
Mm,
how you're thinking, how you're able to focus and concentrate. If you have a sport that requires a lot of focus and concentration, my son, for example, is a quarterback.
mhm.
Not necessarily all of football requires a ton of focus and concentration, but quarterbacking in particular is, I would say, one of the highest
Mm,
focus and concentration positions where that's needed. And he knows, he's so dialed in with his food, and consequently, he has 7 Division I offers on the
mm.
table.
Wow.
So I tell this to you because I have kids.
Yep.
I'm not just have I lived this
Mm.
and done it wrong and had a shortened career because
Yeah.
of this, but I'm also I'm raising 2 young
Mm.
ones, 2 teens who are on the path to great success with athletics because it's what they love doing.
Yeah.
And I'm just here to support them. And they have been able to make this link between what they eat and how they feel,
Right.
not just how they look.
Yeah, and I think that even goes back to when you're talking about the puzzle piece of all these different aspects. Mindset is such a powerful tool when we're even thinking about our nutrition because
Mhm.
we have to correlate that food with this is going to make me feel better. This is going to give me more
Yes.
endurance, more
Yes.
strength.
Absolutely. And if no one's teaching you that, you may not have ever heard that before. So
Mm,
we're here today to let y'all
yeah.
know that this is how you have to think of it. You have to think of what I'm eating is so much bigger than just how I look. It is really correlated to strength, recovery time,
Mhm.
injury prevention, endurance, energy day in and day out, energy throughout your practices.
Yeah.
I have my so we live right by our kids' school.
Mhm.
So lots of kids, lots of student athletes come through this house every day. So I'm always talking to the kids and asking them about their food and all that. And I can't tell you how many kids don't have, I call it an FPOD, fueling
Mhm.
plan of the day.
Ooh,
And 99% of them they're on a wing and a prayer. It's
yeah.
like, well, what, they just haven't thought about it. Even just that simple strategy of just thinking
Mhm.
about what you eat for the day is going to be helpful and put you in front of the cart, so to
Yeah.
speak, with without getting behind in your day.
Yeah, and that just, like, landed with me like, really hugely because I'm thinking of our students, if they're trying to come up with a plan, and they're trying to think about just one step ahead of, like, what else am I gonna fuel my body with because I will have all these other things happening. How can they, have support from their families and their peers as they're trying to do this?
Well, that's why I created my program
Yeah.
because I saw that there is a direct need
Mm,
for people to better understand how to support their athletes. So most my trainings, while every athlete will benefit from listening to them, and I want them to listen to them, it's really geared for parents because
mm,
I want the parent to be able to sit there with child with
Yeah.
athlete, and we all learn together. So there's number one, there's a huge educational piece that's just
Yeah.
missing right now.
Mhm.
I don't see it out there in general. Even when like a registered dietitian goes to a team, that's awesome that the team brings that person in. But what happens is they leave them with like, a PDF,
Mm.
and then they're like, okay, a PDF. That's why I'm creating right now. It's called Team Fuel Compete Repeat, and it's a subscription based, so it's monthly
Ah,
coaching.
yes.
Because this fuel thing, a lot of people think, well, like just tell me the diet and we'll
Mm.
do it. It's not like that. It's like learning a foreign language, and so you don't stop at French 101 if you want to be elite.
Right.
If you want to speak French or Spanish fluently, you go through up to the 300s.
Yes.
We all know this. Like this
Uh-huh.
is not uncommon. So it's the same thing with this nutrition thing. Like you gotta get in with someone who can teach you a system,
Yep.
and you got to learn the 100 level, the intro. You got to learn the next level, and you got to build on it if you really want to integrate it into your life. And I will say this. I say this all the time. Nutrition education is the gift that keeps on giving. It
Yes.
really is, because you are setting your children up for success in life when they
Mm.
learn these skills.
Yeah, that just reminds me, I was talking with a former teammate of mine, and we were going through. We're like, we didn't do all these things when we were young athletes. We didn't think about the food we needed to eat. We just like whatever was put in front of us. That's kind of what we took. But now, as our friends' kids and their kids are becoming these high school age teenagers and wanting to play elite sports, this has become so forefront right now of how can we make this happen. And that's what I love what you do, is because you have provided an avenue for parents and students to do this together.
Yes, and it is imperative. I have found there is the rare teenager to 19 going into those first years of college that will take it on themselves, and
Mhm.
that they want to learn how to cook. And that's really what I want to do next. Is I have a whole curriculum ready for teaching the like pre-college to first years of college athlete how to cook for
Oh,
themselves
go ahead
in
and
a
sign me
dorm.
up for that class.
Yeah.
I still need to learn how to do some of these things.
Yes, like simple
Yeah.
cooking strategies. Say all you have is a hot plate.
Mhm. Yes.
Maybe you just have. I have a few clients right now who are dealing with that. Their daughter is in college, and she had this. She didn't even have a hot plate. So I said, "Oh my gosh, next year we got to get at least a hot plate if you don't have a kitchen."
Right.
So these are just little things I can
Mhm.
help design, because I've cooked for elite athletes on the road. I've helped elite athletes with these types of plans, and I do this with mine when we have to travel for things. So
Right.
I have and I wish I would have understood this when I was training and doing all this, and
Yeah.
not eating McDonald's in
Right.
Spain before my Olympic debut, and all that stuff I can pull from.
Right. And that's, I think about this as kids are going through this journey and thinking of how they can fuel their body properly. But what you've seen is you've seen actually kids be super successful with this, of where, so if you think about students maybe you've worked with and they're like, I'm part of the way into this, like I'm not 100% buying in. But then you have the kid who is 100% buying in. What has been the difference that you've seen in their athletic journey?
Yeah, the buy-in is critical, but I want to go back and remind everyone watching that it's never too late.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
don't, even though my kids have been raised this way, like I didn't do any of these changes myself until my 20s. So
Right.
it's never too late. And I was a sugar addict.
Mm.
So if I can change my sugary ways, anyone can. And so I say that really anyone can shift their taste buds. And at the same time, parents who are listening, one of the sole jobs you have is to formulate your child's taste buds at an early age. Like it's really important if you can commit to that. I find that is a big difference maker. However, it's never too late. So at the
Right.
same time, we can always shift. So everyone is starting from a different place. Some people have had parents who've driven this thing, so they kind of have a really good foundation already of like we'll just call it clean eating or
Sure.
cleaner eating. Um, and then some people think that they're clean eating and they're not, they have no idea. And then we have some people who are just so far off the rails that they don't even know where to begin. So there's this gamut where do you begin? And I'll go back to those same tenets that I mentioned earlier, which is first start with this foundation that it's never too late. You can always shift your taste buds. And number two, you can always change your body's, let's just say, health status. So let's just say you're like me, for example, and you feel like, gosh, I'm sick all the time, and I don't feel good ever. My energy's low, and I just think this is how life is. No, it's not. I promise you, there's things you can do to shift out of that.
Yeah, and I think that's such an encouraging piece of information for parents and students to also hear is that if they are in that, 10th, 11th grade year and they're looking to really say like, okay, I want to start getting some of these offers. I really want to push the fold on it. Having that knowledge of saying it's not too late, it truly isn't too late wherever you are.
Oh,
Because no
that's
matter
right.
if you're a senior in high school or you're already in college and you're trying to figure out how to take your athletic game to the next level, focusing in on that nutrition is so, so important.
It will give you the biggest bang for your buck. So your investment in time and a little bit of more money into your food is going to go so far. It's going to take you so far. And that is what I really try and impress upon people is this extra, a little bit of extra time, a little bit of extra effort on the food, especially on the learning end. You got to learn some new things. That's
Yeah.
usually critical for people's initial onset of movement in this direction. But my big thing is like, I don't want you being my client forever.
Oh, yeah.
I'm here to support you. If you want to have me for coaching for the long haul, I'm all about it. But in general, this is why like people for years, well, what protein powder do I get? What bar do I get? And I can guide you on those things. But hey, what happens if you go to your grocery store and they don't have that bar?
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
don't have that. You have no idea why I chose that and told you to get it.
Yeah.
That's where I come in with the trainings. I give you, I'm teaching you how to fish
Yeah.
versus giving you the bar. Giving you the bar name is just giving you a fish, but learning how to fish is when the difference gets made.
Yeah. And I love that so much because I'm thinking of our college students who maybe they've just graduated high school, they're heading off to college, and they are maybe in a different state. And there's going to be a different supermarket or grocery store that they're having to go
Yes,
to. And those brand names are vastly different. And, I've lived all over the country and so have you to where you understand that sometimes you're not going to be able to find the
that's
thing that
right.
you're comfortable with. But if
Mhm.
you have that knowledge, you can
Yes.
make the best choice possible when you're there.
Absolutely. And if I, this same goes for a meal plan.
Mhm.
Let's say I create a meal plan and I just hand it off to you, and you're like, wait a minute, there's no, what's Swiss chard? They don't have it here.
Mm.
This store doesn't have it. Well, on my program, on the Powerplay formula, if you learn the formula, then it's a plug-in system.
Oh, yeah.
So all you have to learn is the categories and what they stand for. So when you go to your store, you just plug in, well, oh, they didn't have Swiss chard, but they had cabbage.
Mm.
So I'm sure this, cabbage will work because I know that that's also a green power on Anita's
Yes.
system. So it's a system approach is how I go with it, or a formula. Really, it's
Yeah.
a formula because I'm a plug-in formula person. I'm like, I like to have with my skincare. I like to have the cleanser. I like to have the this and the this. It's like
Yeah.
I want it in alignment, and so that's how I teach as well.
Yeah. Which is so awesome because I think that just what that does too is gives you empowerment to really
Yes,
make those choices because then you have the knowledge and I love this because then it snowballs not only to that student and that student's family, but then as they go along in their athletic career, it snowballs into their teammates.
that's
And
right.
then they can then say, "Oh, I learned this from Anita and we were talking
Mhm.
and here's how, my sprint got faster or my endurance lasted a little longer."
Mhm.
And they are able to share that wisdom with their teammates.
Yes, and a lot of this is where the tricky part is for me is that sometimes we forget how cruddy we felt. Like
Yeah.
we forget how slow our metabolism used to be. We forget how hard it used to be to wake up in the morning.
Mm.
So these are little things we want to sort of note along the way. It's like, okay, before I started in this program, I had this chronic cough or this weird like phlegm in my throat all the time. And I realized, and then 3 months later, you go, I just realized that phlegm thing that
Mm.
I used to be doing all the time is gone.
Ah.
Or if you're anything like me with digestive discomfort and chronic digestive issues almost my whole life, then you go, I just realized like I'm not as bloated as I used to be. Or gosh, do you remember when I used to have stomach aches all the time? I've had clients like that too. I worked with an Olympian who is multi-medal Olympian and used to deal with crippling stomach pain.
Mm.
And it was due to food sensitivities and food allergies that we worked on. And I just helped her discover through testing so that she could get that figured out.
Wow.
And can you imagine how debilitating that was? And she
Oh
was
my
still,
gosh.
she was still amazingly pushing through mentally, but
But again, I think you go back to having all those pieces of the puzzle. If you're able to like you had the the mindset training, you had the grit, you had the athletic training, and then you add in this small other piece of nutrition and it
that's
just
right.
changes everything.
Yes, I call them nutrition and wellness strategies. And I would venture a guess that if we have that Trivial Pursuit puzzle piece,
Mhm.
what I'm talking about is actually half of that puzzle piece,
Yeah.
a full half of it, all these strategies. And so that is where kids staying up late on their phones, kids
Mhm.
getting too much blue light
Mhm.
exposure on their phones all the time, too much artificial light, period, not getting outdoors enough, not getting enough sun. These are wellness strategies that when you learn these things, you will feel dramatically different.
Wow. And so if parents or students who are listening and they're like, yes, Anita, I want to learn about these power plate strategies and I want to really educate myself so that I can become the best athlete possible, where do they go to find some of this information?
So I have a couple ways. So my website is right now it's anitanall.com or championpowered.com.
Okay.
Champion Powered or Anita Nall, NALL.com. And on my Work With Me page, we have some free things like a downloadable training. We've got a great fueling quiz that you can take.
Oh, okay.
So if you don't know kind of like where you stack up, how you're doing with your fueling, take the quiz and then you'll find out, oh, okay, wait, I think there's a lot of work I have that I can do here. So the quiz will help guide you in that. And that's free also. And then the first thing that the first level, I sort of, if you're purchasing, would be my Power 5 Jumpstart package, which
Mhm.
is the 5 trainings that everyone should start with, that every athlete needs to know before they move to. That's like the 101,
Yeah. Yeah.
before you move on to that next level. And then there's monthly coaching after that.
Well, it's just so awesome. And you guys, if you like have questions, want to get a hold of Anita, we'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes so
Thank
that
you.
everybody has that and they can reach out to you. And, if they need to contact you or go ahead and get started with that. And
Yeah,
so,
I'll just say real quick too, sorry to interrupt you, but real quick, I have a YouTube channel and that's all
oh,
free information too. So that is also called Champion Powered with Anita.
oh, perfect. Then we'll make sure to include that too, because I know some parents are going to want to dive in and go ahead
Mhm.
and start learning
Yes.
because they're having to learn for themselves as well so that they can help educate their student. So that
Yes.
is perfect. And Anita, thank you so much for being with us today. But before we go, I have one last question that I ask everybody that's on the podcast. And
Great. Sure.
because the podcast is called Confessions from the Sidelines, what has been your favorite memory while standing on the sidelines?
Well, so when you say while standing on the side, do you mean like watching my kids or when
Oh,
I'm,
either watching your kids or even as, as you were competing, either
well, I'm
or if
trying
you
to
want to do
just,
both, you can do both.
okay. I would say that when I was an athlete, my favorite moments were watching the United States flag being raised
Mm,
at the Olympics and hearing the national anthem for our, even when it wasn't me. I mean,
yeah.
obviously, when I'm on the court, they're playing. That was my favorite experience, was having that flag raised and winning that gold medal. But actually, just watching it and watching our team do great and uh, representing this great country that we live in was really, I would say, watching that was my greatest sideline experience. But now watching my kids and just even just before a football game starts, just as they play the national anthem, for me, it brings those memories back for me. So that's all very special for me.
Oh, I love that so much because I kind of got chills thinking about, watching our competitors at standing on the greatest stage and seeing that American flag being raised. So, which, we're going to dive into that this summer too.
Yes, that's right. So
Yeah.
it's coming up, and you know how it is. Everybody's going to come out of the woodwork to watch, and it truly is one of the greatest events that comes around every 4 years
Mhm.
that everyone loves the Olympics.
Yes, me included. So, thank you so much, Anita, for being with us today. And again, you guys will be sure to include all of Anita's information in case that you want to get in touch with her. And thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.